Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girvaradari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girvaradari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girvaradari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girvaradari Yashoda Nandana Bhajana Yashoda Nandana Yashoda Nandana Bhajana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nasta Pareshu Abhadreshu. That's right. Different order. Okay. Narayanam Namaskrita. Should we all chant together?
Yes.
Okay. Narayanam Namaskrita. Devem Sarasvatam Vyasanam Todayam Vidayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, the conquest, respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan, Rishi, the super being, and to Mother Saraswati, and Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Praeshu Abandreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloki Bhakti Bhagavati Naisiki. Regular attendance in the Bhagavatam class, in service to pure devotees. All those troubles of the heart complete understood. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who was praised with chants and songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Aganatimmadandasya Jananjanan Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim yat kripatam aham vande Shri Guru dinataranam. Respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, the deliverer of fallen souls. Speakers and able the lame to cross mountains. So today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 23, texts 14 through 23. So text 14. Mam get patyata patnibhya. Mam get patya patnibhya. Sashanka shanam agatam. Dasyanti kamam annamba. Snigdha mai usitantiya. Can we do all together?
Is this the verse we're focusing on? Yes. We can do one.
Okay, one month. Okay.
Magyapataya patnibhya
Mamgyapataya Pitya
Sasankarshanamagatam
Samsankarshanamagata
Nasyanti kamam anambaha
Dasyanti Kanam Annamba
Thamayushitadya
Snigdhama Yusitandiya
Mamgyapataya patnibhya
Mamgyapatya Pitya
Sasankarshanamagatam
Sasankarshanamagata
Dashyanti kamam anambaha
Dasyanti Kanam Annamba Snigdhama Yusitandiya
Mamgyapayat patnibhya
Mamgyapayat Patnibhya Samshankarshanam Agatam Dasyanti Kam Anamba Snigdhamayasadiya
Mamgyapayat patnibhya
Mamgyapataya Patnibhya
Sasankarshanamagatam
Sankarshanamagata
Dasyanti kamamanava
Dasyanti Anamba
Snigdhami
Sadiya. So we'll do the word for word together. Mami. Patya. Please announce Patnibhya to the wives. Sankarshanam, together with Lord Balaram. Agatam, arrived. Dasyanti, they will give. Kamam, as much as you desire. Anam, food. Va, you. Snigdha, affectionate. Mai, may. Ushita, residing. Diya, with their intelligence. And we read this together? She said, tell the wives of the Brahmanas that I have come here with Lord Shankarshan. He will give food to you if you want to. Their most affection toward me. Indeed, with their intelligence, reside in me alone. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Well, physically, the wives of the Brahmanas remained at home. Within their minds, they resided in the Supreme Lord because of intense affection for him. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the reason Krishna did not have the cowherd boys tell the Brahmins' wives he was hungry is that he knew this would severely distress these devoted ladies. Simply out of affection for Lord Krishna, however, the wives would be happy to give all the food requested of them. They need not heed their husbands' prohibitions, or they would not heed their husbands' prohibitions, since they resided within the Lord through their transcendental intelligence. Text 15. So you want to take turns reading these verses? Translations.
The cowherd boys then went to the house where the Brahmana's wives were staying. There the boys saw those chaste ladies sitting, nicely decorated with fine ornaments. Going down to Brahmana ladies, the boys addressed them in all humility.
16. The cowherd boy said, obeisances unto you, O wives of the learned Brahmanas. Kindly hear our words. We have been sent here by Lord Krishna, who is passing by not far from here.
He has come a long way with the cowherd boys and Lord Balram tending the cows. Now he is hungry, so some food should be given for him and his companions.
The wives of the Brahmanas were always eager to see Krishna, for their minds had been enchanted by the descriptions of him. Thus, as soon as they heard that he had come, they became very excited.
Taking along a large vessels, the four kinds of foods full of fine taste and aromas, all ladies went forth to meet their beloved, just as rivers flow toward the sea.
Although their husbands, brothers, wives, and other relatives tried to forbid them from going, their hope for seeing Krishna, cultivated by extensive hearing of his transcendental qualities, won out. Along
the river Yamuna within a garden decorated with birds of Ashoka trees, they caught sight of him strolling along in the company of cowherd boys and his elder brother Abraham.
His complexion was dark blue and his garment golden, wearing a pick of colored maroons, sprigs of flower buds, and a garland of forest flower and leaves. He was dressed just like a dramatic dancer. He was rested once hand upon the shoulder of a fan, and with the other twirled a lotus. Lilies graced his ears, his hair hung down over his cheeks, and his lotus-like face was smiling.
O ruler of men, for a long time those Brahmana ladies had heard about Krishna, their beloved, and his glories had become the constant ornaments of their ears. Indeed, their minds were always absorbed in him. Through the apertures of their eyes, they now forced him to enter within their hearts, and then they embraced him within for a long time. In this way, they finally gave up the pain of separation from him, just as sages gave up the anxiety of false ego by embracing their innermost consciousness.
Please tell me.
Okay, up to 24. Okay. So this whole pastime would not have been possible if somehow, by Krishna's arrangement, actually two little things, well, one was kind of bigger than the other, but two things didn't happen that enabled this pastime to happen. Does anyone know what they were? Can you remember?
Them leaving the orchards behind when they were.
Well, Krishna, it's described Krishna when he was herding the cows, he sort of made a little detour so they wouldn't go by the orchard, so that otherwise the cowherd boys might have filled their bellies there. And there was,
Well, you showed her doing Zen lunch.
yeah, I was thinking, there must be some amazing pastime behind that, because obviously Madhyasoda would not ever forget to make Krishna's lunch. So there's probably some amazing pastime, what happened to the cowherd boys' lunches, but maybe that will be revealed to us at some point. So sometimes in Krishna's pastimes, sometimes he does very wondrous, amazing, big, huge things like lifting Govardhan Hill and killing these great demons that are just kind of the focus of the dramatic pastimes. And sometimes in his pastimes, there's seemingly smaller little incidents that happen are the catalyst for the whole pastime to unveil. Just like we know Parikshit Maharaj, great saintly devotee, and he was in the forest once, and somehow by some circumstance he became thirsty, and he went looking for water, and he went to the ashram, was it Samik Rishi? Samik Rishi, and the Rishi was completely absorbed in samadhi and his meditation, and seemingly completely out of character, Parikshit Maharaj, he was thirsty, and he thought, well, this sage hasn't greeted me, and some seemingly momentary lapse of, you might say, Vaishnava etiquette, he picked up a dead snake that was nearby with his bow and wrapped it around the sage's neck. Very uncharacteristic of such a saintly king. And as a result, the Brahman's son, Shringi, cursed Maharaj Parikshit to be bit by a snake bird and die in 7 days. So somehow that was the arrangement of Krishna. And one seemingly small, well, not quite so small, but one incident, seemingly out of character for Parikshit Maharaj, but it enabled the entire Srimad Bhagavatam to be recited to him. And therefore today we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is all come to us via that one very unusual pastime that unfolded. And there's many other small things that happen in Krishna's pastimes that sometimes there's some amazing reason behind it. We understand how Duryodhana, he was always, even as a youth, he was very envious of the Pandavas and was trying to create different ways to do away with the Pandavas. And in one instance, he arranged for a poison cake to be made and presented to Bhima. So Bhima is known as a voracious eater, so he devoured this whole cake and appeared to leave his body, appeared to die, and then they threw him in the river. Duryodhana and company threw Bhima's body in the river, and somehow by chance or providence, there were some poisonous snakes in that river, which began biting Bhima's body. And the Shastra describes that somehow the poison that was within Bhima interacted with the poison of the snakes. That counteracted, the snake's poison counteracted the poison in the cake. And somehow, every snake that bit Bhima, his strength increased 100 times the strength of an elephant with each bite.
Bhima or the snakes?
The snake bites increased his strength, increased Bhima's strength. So Krishna arranges these strange things in his pastimes and for his devotees. And we have the pastime also of Chitraketu Maharaj, great saintly king, who was a very amazing pastime with him, how he became very realized after his son had died. And after that, he was traveling in a celestial airplane, and he happened to pass by where Lord Shiva was with his wife, who happened to be sitting on his lap, which was a little unusual in the company of sages. And he made just a friendly, joking remark. And Parvati cursed him to take the body of a demon. I mean, that's quite shocking. Just Chitraketu and Lord Shiva, they were actually on friendly terms, and it was kind of a friendly joke, but Parvati took it in a very different way, cursed him. And Chitraketu was a saintly king. He could have counter-curses, but somehow he accepted that curse, and he became this personality, Vritrasura. And there's a whole amazing pastime in the Bhagavatam, how Vritrasura, he knew that somehow by fate he had accepted this body, and he would have to accept it for one life. And he's having this amazing battle with Lord Indra, and actually he's encouraging Indra to defeat him. And so sometimes Krishna, he arranges things like that mysteriously to happen to his devotees. Sometimes seemingly adverse things happen to his devotees, but somehow there's some reason behind it. So from Chitraketu Maharaj, we learn great lessons. From Parikshit Maharaj, we have the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. So many different things happen to different devotees, seemingly adverse, but there's some reason behind it. And that's a very important lessons we get from Srimad Bhagavatam. So here in this section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's very amazing how the wives of the Brahmanas, just by hearing about Krishna from the different merchants who came through their village and by purchasing flowers from the residents of Vrindavan, and hearing about Krishna, they just developed this intense love and attraction for Krishna. So much so it's described here that they were actually able to situate Krishna within their hearts, just by that process of hearing. And we just chanted this verse, Nasta Praishu Abhadreshu, how by recitation of the Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering service to the pure devotee, all these inauspicious things within the heart become eradicated, and loving service to the Lord can become, it's described, established as an irrevocable fact. So that happened to these ladies. They were so fortunate that they developed that love for Krishna by the process of hearing. And we see on the other side how their husbands, who were ritualistic Brahmins, who had some material desires, they likely may have heard some of these things about Krishna, but it didn't actually register in the same way because they had those material desires. So again, that's a very important lesson, that if we actually want to enter into Krishna's pastimes and fully understand them and fully relish them, it's very important that we have to clean our hearts. And we have the pastime in Chaitanya Charitamrita where Lord Chaitanya and the devotees cleaned the Gaudinja Mandir. And they not only cleaned it once, but they cleaned it actually 3 times with buckets and buckets of water and brooms. They would clean it once and then clean it again with the water. And the last time they all cleaned it with like cloths, just to get rid of very minute little nanoparticles of dirt and dust that might be in the temple. And so Srila Prabhupada describes that that is exactly how we have to clean our hearts from all the residual material contaminations we have from previous lives in this life by the process of sadhana bhakti and devotional service. So Nasta Praishu Badrishu, that verse describes how by the process of hearing and chanting, the heart becomes purified. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj, he describes that while chanting, one may commit offenses. And he says, even if one commits offenses while chanting, one should just chant anyway because one will gradually be purified. And Prabhupada describes that one may chant with offense, and if he doesn't clear those offenses, one may chant for, Prabhupada said, 300 years before one becomes purified. And so Prabhupada actually said in the Bhagavad Gita, one can become Krishna conscious in one moment, or it may take many, many years. And he said it's simply a matter of understanding the facts and accepting. So the fact is we need to become purified. And the fact is we do have contaminated hearts. And therefore we have this process of anartha nivriti, which means to become aware of these unwanted things that are in our consciousness, in our heart, and gradually root them out. So if we chant without consciously trying to do anartha nivriti, we will make purification. It's guaranteed by the process of chanting the holy name. At the same time, we can accelerate that process by doing the anartha nivriti. So the chanting, that is part of anartha nivriti, but actually consciously doing anartha nivriti, that facilitates more pure chanting. So the 2 processes need to go on simultaneously. And so again, by doing anartha nivriti, that will enable one to get the taste for the holy name. That will enable one to eventually come to this point where one can actually embrace Krishna within the heart. So in the pastime of the Gaudinja Mandir, Prabhupada describes like that, how we have to make the heart a very pure place, so that within the lotus of our heart, Krishna will sit there. He's there, but we can't realize it always now. But if we cleanse our heart properly, then Krishna will manifest. So that process of anartha nivriti, it's extremely important. And that's one of the reasons we do some of the things we do, such as the seminar we're doing this weekend. It's examining how we can do some serious anartha nivriti. And Srila Prabhupada, he described once that he was talking about different sciences, and he said chemistry, and he mentioned psychology. And he said they can be utilized in Krishna's service. And he said when they're utilized solely and wholly in the service of Krishna, he said they factually become Hari Kirtan. So using something like psychology to understand our anarthas can help us see them a little more clearly, and we can see practical ways in which we can remove those things from our heart. And by removing those things from our heart, it purifies the heart, and also very importantly, it actually prevents us from making offenses. Because sometimes, due to our conditionings and previous lives and this life, we react in ways that are sometimes maybe not so Vaishnava. And that can happen in different degrees. So you have someone like Shishupal and Duryodhana who were continually blaspheming the Pandavas and criticizing them. And so Vaishnava, that is the most blatant. On a scale of Vaishnava Parad, if it was 1 to 1,000, that would be like right off the chart. Duryodhana and Shishupal. So in the Mahabharata, Maharaj Yudhisthira, he asked Bhishma Dev, what do you do when someone is blaspheming you, even in a public assembly? What should you do? And Bhishma's reply was, he said, one should not even reply. He says, because whatever you say, they will turn it against you. And he said, when someone is criticizing you publicly or blaspheming you, he said, when you accept that, just you let that come upon you and you don't react. He said, the pain of feeling that blasphemy or criticism, which may be very unjust, the pain of hearing that is actually your impious karma being burnt off. And he described, in that process of your impious karma being burnt off, the person who's blaspheming you, Bhishma said that their pious credits come to you, and all your impious credits go upon them. So,
Good deal.
so good. And so that's extreme. Shishupal. We're not on the level of Shishupal, but still sometimes we may make small offenses and become a little influenced by the modes of material nature and say harsh things. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it describes the austerity of speech, is to speak in a way that's, it's pleasant. Does anyone know that verse? We can do both.
Austerity of speech consists of speaking words that are pleasing, truthful, beneficial to others, and regularly reciting very little.
Sorry, one more time.
Austerity of speech consists of speaking words that are pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others, and regularly reciting Vedic literature.
Yeah. So beneficial, pleasing, not agitating, and in line with Vedic literature. So that's austerity of the speech. And that is the mode of goodness. And something going on there, I missed. Anyway, okay. So that is the mode of goodness. And we also understand from Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, the importance of coming to the mode of goodness. And there's great descriptions of the modes of material nature in Bhagavad Gita, ignorance, passion, how it manifests in different activities and different ways. And it's important to recognize those manifestations of the modes in our activities, and especially in our speech. Because to come to a platform like the wives of the Brahmanas, or to come to understand the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, you have to develop this spiritual consciousness, the Vasudeva consciousness, which is the mode of goodness. So when Prabhupada describes like that, you can only understand Krishna when you come to the mode of goodness and pure goodness. We can't understand Krishna from the modes of passion and ignorance. And he describes in the 14th chapter that how the modes are manifest in practically all activities. And he says one can develop the mode of goodness by practice. So practice means like you're learning to play harmonium, you practice. You don't always get it right, but you do it again and again, you get it right. So practicing the mode of goodness means to learn to see, what the mode of goodness looks like in different activities, and to realize how am I living up to that standard, and work towards that. And so especially in Vaishnava relationships, that's very important, because if we don't cultivate healthy, respectful relationships, then there's a danger that we may commit either gross or subtle offenses. And so just even austerity speech should be pleasing. So sometimes it would be neat to say something to someone, and because maybe we're a little agitated, we're a little in the mode of passion, maybe a little in the mode of ignorance, it might not come off in a pleasing way. We might say it a little harshly, with a little barking voice. And so that may be like a small offense, but it's still a little bit in the modes of material nature. And learning to overcome that, that's the process of sadhana bhakti. That's narta nivriti, to come to a more mode of goodness platform. And is it always easy? No. Can it be practiced? Yes. And that's why reading the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita is so important, to learn to understand what saintly behavior is actually about. And so we read Srimad Bhagavatam, and we see the characteristics of these saintly devotees, which such immense humility and tolerance and patience they had. And what can we learn from that? What can we take from that? What can we take from each verse and apply it in our lives? And again, if we don't make that conscious effort to actually practice the mode of goodness to improve ourselves, we will improve because we're chanting the holy name, but it may take longer if we don't actually put that effort in to correct ourselves when we make those mistakes. And because we can see what the result is. We could be, we could chant for many years. The Brahmins were chanting all kinds of Vedic mantras, but somehow they didn't quite get it at the most important point in their life, when they had an opportunity to render direct service to Krishna. They actually missed it. They missed it because somehow they didn't actually do the process with the right intent. Whereas these simple Brahminical wives, they just heard with submission, and they had that humility, and they were actually able to understand that, okay, here's Krishna, he's coming. And so much so that they could actually embrace Krishna in their hearts. So that's such an amazing thing. So I'm going to stop there and ask if there's any questions or comments.
You share the pastimes of how Parikshit Maharaj put the snake in the rishi. So can you explain why he did that? Because it was also, I believe I heard that he was a perfect king.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just elaborate.
No one can understand the plan of the Lord or the Lord's pure devotees. And my godbrother Rasaraj told me he read somewheres that when Parikshit Maharaj caught the Sudra who was beating a cow, and who was the personification of Kali, and Kali asked the king, well, where can I reside? And he's told him, well, you can reside where gold is being hoarded or present. And apparently there's some description that somewhere, so within gold, the influence of Kali can be present, and Maharaj Parikshit apparently had worn a gold crown, and so the influence of Kali was just in there a little bit, which just momentarily bewildered him, caused him to put the snake around the sage's neck, and that actually opened the door for Kali Yuga to enter in this age. But it's a part of Krishna's pastime. Part of Krishna's pastime. So sometimes there's a lot of intricacy there in the Lord's pastimes.
So a further question, is there still Kali influence in the gold?
Beg your pardon?
Still influence of Kali in the gold?
We definitely see it in the world today. Kali Yuga's.
So does that mean we should not get it? Or like?
Well, you shouldn't hoard gold. In Vedic times, currency would actually be precious metals. But my understanding, people didn't necessarily hoard gold, but they kept gold. and we see how, like how the richest people in the world, such a huge percentage of the wealth of the world is held by a very small percentage of individuals. They're actually hoarding wealth, whereas the majority of people in the world barely get by. So that's the influence of Kali manifest through hoarding wealth and gold.
I find it really interesting how, on that point, how sometimes the devotee, they momentarily make a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
but you see their greatness when they go to correct it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's important for us too. Like if we know what austerity of speech looks like, and sometimes we may blow it. We may not. We may speak a little harshly, but if we realize it after the fact, we can always go back and apologize. And just say, Prabhu, you know, I was having a bad day. And I didn't say that the best I could. And then you, that remorse, you counter whatever offense you made. And again, those aren't huge offenses, but still they can impede our progress. Even small offenses can impede our progress. There's a hand there.
Next Prabhu, you mentioned that the pastime of Vishnu Pitama, that he mentioned that to Yudhishthira Maharaj that the pain of bearing the blasphemy will take your impious karma. Can you explain more?
Well, it will burn, your impious credits become burnt off. So that's the austerity, is to just hear that with folded hands, and that discomfort is like a fire, and it's described that, then that's a purification. You're becoming relieved of bad karma just by tolerating. Somehow Krishna's arranged that situation for you to become purified. Krishna sometimes he can arrange other ways for us to become purified. Krishna sometimes he takes everything away from someone, or he might give you some disease or something. It's all meant for a purification.
When a person who is not practicing Krishna consciousness,
When
when a person who is not practicing Krishna consciousness is in a great amount of difficulty, and because of the difficulty he comes to Krishna consciousness, should he see that as Krishna's hand, or should he see it as because of his past karma he suffered that difficulty?
It's both. I mean, we're suffering because of our past activities, and it also becomes an impetus to take shelter of Krishna. And that's a blessing when one can see that Krishna's putting me into difficulty so I can take shelter of him. And that's how sometimes they say bad becomes good. Sometimes people say, why do bad things happen to good people? There's some lesson to learn there. Any other questions?
So you mentioned that in the same point that was brought up regarding bearing of blasphemy, the pain of discomfort is like fire which burns the past karma. So my question is, how much, like, if the person is a little bit sensitive, then is it okay to feel affected by it, like by hearing that, or then is it wrong for us to feel affected by it?
You feel what you feel. You can't. You cannot abnegate your feelings. So we may not be on a platform where, we can come to that state where we realize this is Krishna's mercy. And we can be affected by it. And that's real, and we feel that. We may understand it philosophically, but at the same time, it's difficult. And in those kind of circumstances, it might be helpful to maybe point out to the individual later on that, you might let them know that maybe there's a better way they could have said what they need to say to you. Or maybe you could ask them, is there something that's troubling you that caused you to speak in that way? Because actually everyone is a pure spirit soul. Everyone has compassion and kindness. It's innate in who we are as spirit souls, but because of these material coverings and material contaminations and negative experiences we have even during the day may filter out in how we speak with others. And so the problem's not, if the person is speaking harshly, he's doing something that's wrong, but it's not that he's bad or she's bad. It's somehow they've been affected by something that's triggering them to behave in a way that's maybe not so Vaishnava. So if we can realize that they're just having a bad day, it makes it easier to sometimes tolerate.
Materialistic question. So, for example, if I go to work and in my section there are more females than males in my section. So, what their way of greeting is hugging each other. So they sometimes comes to me. So at that time, how should we avoid it, or like how should we treat it in a way?
That's probably hard if you're single or a brahmachari. I mean, I'm sure Grahastha could probably handle things like that. I mean, I've worked in a work atmosphere and was quite friendly with the people there, and sometimes it would just be like a sisterly kind of hug thing. If that's awkward for you, you could express that to them just in a kind way, just let them know it makes you feel, I just say, I have the greatest respect for you, and it just makes me feel a little uncomfortable, and ask them if they're okay with that. But just to be honest and let them know.
Anyways, they're older than me, so
Yeah.
I don't think, but yeah, still it's like our men heart is like butter and then women are
Yeah.
like fire. So
Yeah. And we want to observe that just for our own protection, and at the same time we want to be civil and human, and that's important also, to be civil. And again, that's very much time and circumstance in the individual, but you want, if it's uncomfortable, if they're perceiving you're uncomfortable by their attempt to be friendly, that might be a little bewildering to them. So you can explain that to them from your side, just sincerely, that you have the greatest respect for them, and it just makes you feel a little uncomfortable, and that's important.
Hugs are my thing.
Yes, so you were talking about how the difference between brahmanas and wives of brahmanas. Brahmanas are ritualistic, doing everything very perfectly, but they're missing the point. They're missing the devotion. And on the other side, wives of brahmanas, even though they were very simple, but they were actually getting the point. They were remembering Krishna, thinking about him. So sometimes we also can get a bit ritualistic in our chanting, in our devotional service. It's like we're doing everything perfectly, but we are missing the point. So how to make a conscious shift in doing things while remembering Krishna and knowing why we are doing it?
I think to see, I talk about gut feelings. Sometimes you say you feel something in your gut, it's not right. That's actually true. There's actually incredible amount of nerves and neurons that go between the brain and the heart, and the brain and the gut. And sometimes we sense things that something doesn't feel quite right, and that's the indication that some adjustment needs to get made. So if we can become sensitive, if I'm chanting and my chanting's not gradually getting better, it seems to be getting worse, well, maybe there's some little adjustment I need to make. We need to be very perceptive of those things, because it's easy to become, like you say, do things as a ritual without really understanding what the result is. There's an interesting series of lectures that Prabhupada gave in Vrindavan about the pastime the dilemma about what to do with Asvatthama after he killed Draupadi's sons. And Prabhupada described in several lectures that Krishna was telling Arjuna he should be killed. Krishna was telling him that. Krishna was saying, you should kill Asvatthama because he did this. And so that's like the conclusion of the Vedas is to please Krishna. So Krishna's saying, Arjuna, you should kill him. And it's interesting, Prabhupada said, actually, he said Krishna was testing Arjuna. He said he wanted to see what kind of a Vaishnava was. He wanted to see if he had compassion. Because eventually Arjuna, he saw that what would happen to Asvatthama's mother. And so he didn't. And he ended up pleasing Krishna. But Krishna was giving him the exact opposite instruction just to test him. So what appears to be Vedic or the proper ritual, if it's not creating the right result on the other end, then something's, maybe we're not really approaching it in the right way. So it's not easy to understand sometimes, because like Krishna may be testing us in different ways that we don't know. And that's why the association of devotees is so important, because we have each other as friends and associates who can help give us advice and guidance, and be honest if they see we're getting a little off course.
One thing, can I just respond to that? You can also build in rituals that get you to focus and put your consciousness in the right place. So like when you start chanting or something like that, you can have some part of it where you say a prayer, or you think, okay, I'm just gonna think about the Lord in my heart now, and I'm gonna focus on the deity. So it's part of your ritual, because otherwise you just pick up your own little bit. I do this, I do that. So you can dovetail it by making the focus a ritual, and then it becomes unritualistic.
And that's important in chanting, just to chant with intent. Just to actually start with a if you want to call it a ritual, that make an intent in your chanting that I want to chant to please my spiritual master and Prabhupada to Krishna. And then chant, because you started with that intent. That can be very powerful. And even if you're not able to maintain the full attraction, because you've started with the intent, Krishna accepts that. It's like Sudama Brahman, he had the intent to offer that paltry chipped rice to Krishna, but then he decided not to do it. But Krishna, he accepted the intent, and he pulled it out of his devotee and ate it. And it was an amazing pastime. But Krishna, that intent was very powerful. So realizing we should have that intent, that we don't want to be just mechanical in our devotional service, and just starting with that intent to please Krishna and trying to focus on that more and more.
Prabhu, you just mentioned that Krishna was testing Arjuna because he wanted to see if he has compassion, but at the same time we read in Bhagavad Gita, I might be wrong, but compassion was one of the reasons that Arjuna was hesitating to fight. Isn't like contradicting there? He wants to there he's displeasing Krishna by compassion. Here he wants to, of course he wants to please Krishna by showing compassion. So in our personal, like we're trying to practice Krishna consciousness, and our ultimate goal is to please Krishna's. That verse, Sam Siddhi Hari Doshan, please Krishna. So how do we know when we have our own, let's say, desires? We don't know how we can ultimately do in a way that it pleases Krishna, either by showing compassion or restricting someone, or
I think those things become more and more clear the more we work on purifying our heart. Because just like the wives of the Brahmanas, their heart was so pure, they were embracing Krishna in their heart. It was that close to Krishna. So because we're all in a neophyte stage in the process of sadhana bhakti, our hearts are somewhat pure, but still a little clouded. So Krishna, he may be trying to give us some indications, and we can't quite perceive. But if our heart becomes pure enough, then we can actually dictation from Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, he was asked once by a reporter something about, I can't remember the exact question. It was something to the effect of, well, how do you know what to do in like serving Krishna? And Prabhupada was explaining how he takes dictation from the Super Soul. And one devotee was there, and the devotee said, what Srila Prabhupada means is that he knows what to do based on what's in the Shastra. And Prabhupada said, no, Krishna speaks to me directly. So that's, Prabhupada's on that platform. We're not on that platform. But we can, if we really keep studying Prabhupada's books, we're going to have reference point to try to sort those things out based on what we know from Shastra, and asking other people who are learning the Shastra, what do you think about this situation that I'm going through? Can you help me understand this? But the more we become advanced and purified, the more we'll be able to see through the eyes of the Shastra, and then one day, Krishna, he may speak to us directly from our heart.
You were mentioning about gut feeling and intuition,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it feels like this is I should do.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it reminds me of that when Krishna says that from him comes intelligence and remembrance and forgiveness.
And forgetfulness, yeah.
So does that mean that when we have those, something telling us to do, pursue something or not, it's like Krishna trying to speak to us?
Those, sometimes we refer to those things as we think intuition. And Srila Prabhupada said there is no such thing as intuition. He said it is super soul.
Okay.
It is super soul. But for us, trying to understand what's super soul and what's our mind, again, because we're still a bit of a fog, material fog, it's a challenge. But that's sadhana bhakti. We're working towards scrubbing our heart.
Sometimes Krishna's talking to us and we're going,
So, you talked about gut feelings. So when to know, should we have full trust in our gut feeling? Like the way you said it came across like it's always true. For example, sometimes my gut feeling may be wrong. I may be bewildered or
Mm-hmm.
yeah. When to trust gut feelings and when not to trust.
I think we should be inquisitive to try to understand, and then with our intelligence, try to understand how to act. I'm feeling this, then through our intelligence, try to understand, okay, how do I apply that? Do I neglect that, or do I, is this actually Krishna telling me something? And
but don't ignore it.
don't ignore it. Yeah, take a look at it. Yeah, because those kind of feelings and emotions that we're feeling, you can't kind of just erase them. And like the word emotion actually means to put in motion. So emotions are meant to put us in some direction. And if that emotion isn't in a spiritual line, if we understand our philosophy of Krishna consciousness, we'll be able to realize that I need to put my attention somewhere else. But if we see what I'm feeling is going to help me come closer to Krishna, then it's moving us in the right direction. So it requires some thoughtfulness, and ultimately we want to surrender to Krishna totally, moment to moment. And Krishna tells in Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita that I explained everything to you, and he says, now deliberate on this and do as you wish to do. And Prabhupada described the best way to surrender to Krishna is to think through things as fully as one can with one's intelligence and then decide. So even those kind of seemingly small little decisions and things that happen, we can still think through it and then decide. And that's the key, I think, to actually to think and decide rather than be reactive. Because sometimes if we just react to some feeling or thought without thinking it through, it may be detrimental. Sometimes we may just react to something that's actually spiritual. That's good if we just react. But the material things we want to be able to filter out.
question is, what does that effort practically look like?
From whatever and wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one should, Krishna says, bring it back under the control of the self. So it means controlling the mind and also controlling our behavior in Vaishnava ways. And it's a conscious process, and it's just, I think that's something we all need to do individually is examine is, what can I work on in my spiritual life? And what it looks like in terms of the result is that you will become more satisfied, you will become more peaceful, things will become more clear. And what it looks like if we don't make that effort, then chanting may become something that I have to do. I have to chant my rounds. It becomes almost like a burden. But if we're engaged in the process of anartha nivritti, we can realize actually I have an opportunity to have quality time with Krishna. It can change the whole dynamic of the way we see and experience things. So I think we're a little over time, so I will end there. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. You work